really help your acrylic paint stay workable. So make sure you have at least something to help keep them a little bit moist overall. With a smaller model, it's not as big a deal, but if you were working on a larger one, you would absolutely want that. Okay, so this is hopefully what our finished product is going to be a little bit like, but it's okay if we end up with a slightly different shade. So we're going to start with your primed model. And the first thing you're going to do is pick up your large round brush. All right. These are miniature painting brushes and they're excellent for dry brushing and applications. And we are going to start with, let me check my notes, Pearl. So Pearl should have been listed in your colors. We're going to grab up a decent amount. And this is just setting a metallic layer. And just go ahead and kind of scumble it there into the body all around. The trick with acrylic paint is to go in thin layers that you move and get into place right away. So I don't know how well the pearl is showing up on the camera, but hopefully it's looking a little bit shinier now. One thing that you will notice about some champagne horses is they are very pearly looking. So do not withhold on the metallics and the sparkle on these guys.
I love the sparkly coats on some of the double dilutes that.
Oh my gosh, they're beautiful.
Beautiful.
And sometimes they'll feel like you'll put it on and you're like, really? Is it really supposed to be that metallic? And then you look at the reference picture and you go, yep, that's what it looks like. And if you end up with something a little too metallic or sparkly, a quick trick is if you then put on a layer of sealer, that will sometimes kind of dial back the sparkle a little bit. So if you think you've overdone it, that will always help you kind of balance it back to where you want it.
And for sealers, just any like super clear, or do you have a preference that you like to work with?
So I personally love both Mr. Super Clear, which is great as like a sealer for in between layers while I'm still working. It's a good finishing spray too, but I especially love it for in between layers. I also really like the Army Painter sealers and primers. Those seem to play very, very well on a lot of models and plastic types, and I've never had like problems with the chemical reaction or anything on those. So I highly recommend those.
And those are pretty readily available at most art stores. I think they're pretty.
Yep. You can either order like on Amazon or if you want to order through Army Painter or from the retailers themselves. Green Stuff World also has some really excellent, very thin, watery primers that are good for the really small figures, because you can put it on as much as you want and not lose any detail on it. Okay. You can also work the pearl into the mane and tail. So if you look at pictures of champagnes, sometimes they might remind you a little bit of Palominos. They might have that very pearly mane and tail with the white. So you can go ahead and get that rubbed in. And this is why I love acrylics, because they do dry quickly and it's easy to handle your model. Alyssa, let me know if the camera's out of focus or if I'm holding my model.
Yeah, no, it's looking pretty good to me. Easy to follow along.
Okay. All right.
And if anyone who's watching live has any questions, feel free to drop your question in the chat and I will relay it to Jen.
We love questions. And if you come back to this video later on and you're watching it while as a recording, you're always welcome to find me at the studio of Jenn Constantine on Facebook. I would be more than happy to answer questions if you have those or run into problems. Okay. All right. So we have a nice pearly layer. It's going to probably be all over your fingers, and that's fine. That's half the fun. All right. I'm going to clean out my brush a little bit. Okay. All right, that should dry pretty quickly. If you're painting along and you start to feel like the paintbrush is starting to stick a little bit to the model, that usually means that the acrylic needs to sit and dry for another few minutes. So if it gets sticky, let it sit. It's okay if you're not exactly keeping pace with me here. You can always follow along or catch up later. But if you feel that stickiness or start to see the paint kind of like ring or do funny things, let it sit and dry a little bit more thoroughly. That just means it's saying it wants to be left alone for another little bit. Okay. All right. What's next? Okay. Gold metallic. So this is our wash, which is a lot of fun. I'm going to grab another, I'll use my mid brush here. All right. So a wash is a very watery layer of paint meant to kind of go into the deep spots on a model. And this layer may look a little funny when you do it, but don't panic. It's not going to look like the finished product at this stage. Okay, so just trust the process. So get a good amount of water on your brush, and you're going to add that to your gold. If you can see me. I don't know if you can see how the paint kind of pulls back on my paper and thins out a lot there. So we're going to get very thin. I might even get some more water because I almost want it to run all over the model when I put it on there. It's okay if you get some drips. And we're just going to kind of pull it all around. Alyssa, can you see how that's kind of like a pooling?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. You want it super watery.
Yeah, very, very watery. Very watery. And like I said, it's okay if it's dripping, kind of running down the model. You can always kind of like touch up a spot, but see how it's kind of settling into the deep spots? Sometimes that can help your later layers look like they have some depth to them. So just get this wash all over the model. And it's okay if there's some spots where it doesn't show up a whole lot.
And you still want to try to do thin layers even with your wash?
Yes, very thin layers. But with the water, you're not going to really hurt anything here.
No, this is very cool. What got you into painting with acrylics, Jen?
Well, several years ago when I kind of rediscovered model horses, started checking out Facebook groups and started seeing that people painted them. I was like, oh, this looks like something I would like, and started learning more about it. Acrylics were just what I had on hand. And I didn't really realize at the time that they kind of had a reputation for like not being workable or fun in the hobby. So as I started painting, then people started realizing I was using acrylics, and their reactions kind of surprised me. They were like, wait, that's acrylics? I was like, yeah. Like, what else would it be? You can obviously get really stunning results with oils as well. I just find with like the way that my brain works and my the time that I have to sit down and paint, having the faster drying layers is what works better for me. But
yeah, no, I mean, definitely. I mean, I've been doing a few of these workshops now for a while, and I've learned so many different techniques, but I think the biggest one, and every artist I'm on with, they stress about the thin layers. And I mean,
yes,
when I was
thin layers.
I would glob the horses.
Yes, yeah. And if you kind of think about it, like, oh, your first customized horse in acrylics, it kind of we get like that poster paint texture too, like really thick and gloppy, and you can see the brush strokes in it. And again, acrylic can do some really cool things with texture. But if you thin it down and work with it in a highly pigmented thin layer, you can actually get some really cool results. Okay, I'm going to let this dry for a minute. Now, obviously, the downside of using the wash is that it takes longer to dry. But you should be able to see kind of like a gold sheen all over the model. And it's okay if it's pooling in some of the darker areas, like dark on the leg and the flank, along the muscling on the shoulders and the neck. That's okay. Because even if you look at a horse,
highlighting the muscles.
Yeah, it's going to highlight the muscle, and it's also going to help come back later if you decide to go. We'll talk about how we go back in with a paler color to help pick out some of the highlights on the model. But even if you look at a horse that's like, say, a very basic chestnut, there's still variation in their coat color. So don't freak out if you're getting variation in your coat. Like that's just part of it. If that's what you're going for, is that realistic look. All right. Oops. See, I just got a big drip. That happens.
Always messy, but it's fun. Messy.
Always messy. This is a good mess. This is a constructive mess. I'm going to get a little bit more here. Okay. Let that dry. So we should be looking very shiny right now. I know it still doesn't really look anything much like the example that was posted. That's okay. Don't panic. Trust the process. So while this is drying, I'm actually now going to mix my body color. I'll bring my palette in over here. Here we go. All right. I often just use toothpicks to mix up my colors. You can also get like those little disposable makeup spatulas if you prefer, but these do in a pinch here. So I believe, let's see, here are my notes. So I have a ratio written down to help establish our body color. So if you're following like a recipe card for paints and you see a number with a colon and then another number, that's a ratio. So for example, what I'm going to use is a 2:1 gold and unbleached titanium. So that means 2 glops or whatever you want to call it, or paint drops. It actually just might be easier for me to get out of my bottle.
While you're mixing that, Jen, we have a question from Jenny.
Okay.
What would you recommend for prepping and priming a model, either already painted or an unpainted one from one of Breyer's kits?
Okay, so you're talking about prepping original factory plastic?
Yes, either that
Yes.
or do we need to do any additional prepping on the unpainted stablemates you get from a kit?
So what I would do, if you really, especially if you're wanting to maybe be able to put on a show table or something like that, you can sand down the seams and also remove the logo if you prefer. I left the logos on these just for brevity's sake, but that is something that some people who are intending to like really customize it do. Is take off the logo, sand down the seams, anything that you think may catch the paint and kind of highlight it in a strange way, you want to take off the model so that it looks nice and smooth and realistic. Give it a good bath, especially after you've sanded it. You don't want any of that grit or anything hanging on and getting in your paint. And then you prime it. And you can prime it with just white, or you can even prime it in different colors if you want to give your base coat a little bit of a boost. But it's not a whole lot different from prepping resins and other models like that. You just might have to spend a little bit more time on the seams, or if there's a little spot that got a little wonky coming out the mold, maybe resculpt it a tiny little bit to fix it. But it's pretty basic and straightforward. I hope that answered the question. Let me know if I didn't touch on all the fine spots there. Okay, so I've kind of mixed up. I'm going to put a little bit more of unbleached titanium in that because it's looking a little gold. So I've done basically kind of like a 2-to-1 ratio of my gold with my unbleached titanium. And I decided it was looking a little strong, so I put just a little bit more unbleached titanium. You can kind of eye it. Here we go. Okay. And let's come back in. Is this mostly dry? A little bit. If you see some super watery spots and you kind of want to hurry along, you can always tap it gently with the brush to kind of pull some of the extra water back out of it.
And if it is not dry, if it's not dry yet, this workshop will be recorded and posted on the events website. So you can go ahead and watch it either tomorrow or later on tonight when your model has dried.
Yeah, don't panic if you're not matching pace right now. I'm going a little bit fast for the sake of the time frame that we have here. So my model's still a little bit damp, but I'm going to go ahead and keep pressing forward. And sometimes I don't mind a little bit of the mixing of the colors because, I mean, they're all going to complement each other either. So this is your main body color. Now it's tempting to want to put it on heavy and have it look kind of like the finished coat right away. Again, put it on nice and thin with kind of the dry brushing, which is that round motion. You can also kind of put it on in the direction of the hair that would be on a horse. So if you do get a little bit of that brushstroke look, it's still a little bit realistic. So it's down the neck, down the barrel, the legs. You have that little swoosh for the flank there. Sorry, it's a little shadowy here. And you're going to see that color start to even out. Again, don't panic if the color is not completely even, or if you can still see a little bit of your gold underneath it, that's fine. We have layers to go. Those layers will balance out. Same with brush strokes. Don't panic about brush strokes. Those will go away too, especially if you keep it nice and thin and keep your brush a little bit damp so it helps move everything around. All over the face.
And the cool thing about horses is there's no two that are the exact same. So.
There's no two that's the exact same. Yeah, so don't worry if yours ends up looking a little bit different from mine. That's fine. And what I might painting right now might look different from the one that I prepped for the class. So like, even if you follow kind of the same recipe, you may not get the exact same results each and every time. I personally think that's kind of half the fun.
No, there's so many shades of bay. If you're painting just a plain bay, you can do so many different shades and they can look so different from each other.
You absolutely can. And sometimes if one shade doesn't work out, you can go a little bit darker to kind of help balance and fix things. Sometimes I might end up starting to paint one shade of bay and I go, you know what? I don't like that. And it ends up a little bit darker than I planned. And that's fine. Okay, so now we should be starting to look a little bit more like a coat color. And again, don't panic if it looks a little uneven or patchy right now. That will start to go away with the layers you build up.
And so we're just using this body color we made, and we're just this is the color we're gonna layer.
Yep, this is what we're going to layer. Now, if you decide that you're starting to look maybe a little too yellow, like if you're looking really gold, you could come back in to try to make it look a tiny little bit more of that pinky cream color. That's kind of noticing what mine is looking like right now. It's a little yellow, which is okay. I'm going to see how it goes for a layer or two, that I might come in with a slightly different mix to balance it back out.
And Jen, we have a question from the live chat. What kind of brush you're using? I believe you touched upon it was a small detail hobby brush, but if you want to talk a little bit about the specific brush you're using.
Yeah. So this just, so in general with my brushes, that's a really common question that a lot of painting artists get is, oh, what brush are you using? And really, I just get super cheap brush sets off of Amazon because I am rough on my brushes. I do not use nice brushes for my work. So this is what you might call a round head. Here, let me get a clean one. And I get these in sets off of Amazon. It's almost like a makeup brush. It's round, it's soft, it's very short, so it's springy, and it's really good for dry brushing and getting down to like little detail areas. You're not having to deal with the long point on this, so this is good for like broader applications. But I just get bunches of these, and then like the cheaper like nail brush sets, kind of like for the fine points, because again, I'm going to wreck them, so I'm not going to spend a whole bunch of money on them. But I've come to really like this set. I believe this exact paint set got linked in the supply list.
Yes.
So if you find that on the blog post, there should be a link to these exact ones. But yeah, this is just a hobby dry brushing. You'll see these get used for tabletop figurines a lot, because you can get a lot of implied detail with just dry brushing different colors on a very textured surface, and that's what these are really great for. Okay. All right, so I've got a good layer going there. I might come back and tweak it a little bit, but something that you can do while you have the body layer drawing is you can start working a little bit on maybe the nose or the eyes modeling and start setting that in a little bit. Now, what I did for mine is I actually started with the pink on the nose and then added gray modeling to that, so I wasn't fighting putting pink over the gray. It's not really a huge deal either way, whichever you do. So to make pink, you'll notice I didn't really have pink listed here. That's because we have a little trick with burnt sienna. You can also do this with the copper if you want a little bit more shine in the pink. I chose not to do the shiny pink, but you can do that if you'd like. So a little bit of your titanium white, not unbleached titanium. I almost got mixed up. Oh, I have unbleached titanium in there. That's okay. And then a little bit of the burnt sienna. So the burnt sienna is a brown, but if you dilute it in white, you're going to see it start to take on like this very natural kind of pinky tone. And if you think it's a little too pink or brown, you can always put in more white if you want to play with the shades on it.
I've never made pink this way, but it definitely has a
there you go. This is a nice way to kind of avoid like more of like a hot pink look. This is more of like a natural kind of skin pink. And you can always work with it kind of like as a base coat. Then if you need to tweak it from there, you can. So I'm going to give him a pink nose. I'm going to use my little brush. And I'm just going to boop, boop, boop. And it's okay if it's a little bit strong at first, because you'll come back and kind of work it in. Pink nose.
And do you have areas where you need to like avoid on the nose and muzzle for pink, or just generally shooting for anywhere around the muzzle and nose is good?
Things like pretty much go anywhere around the muzzle and nose, because we'll kind of work our body layer back over it and kind of soften it a little bit. And then we can kind of come back in with the gray to model it a little bit. If you're not sure on what exactly you want to look like, you can always look for a reference. And if you find a horse that you really like how it looks, you can go kind of copy what you see on that. You can get a little pink up in the groin. And if your brush doesn't quite reach where you want to, you can always grab one of the fine tip brushes that are a little bit longer to help you reach in, maybe up underneath the tail if it's not quite cooperating. You can always switch brushes if you need to. And again, thin application to help start kind of blending it. You can go and kind of go from the round application of kind of like what we generally call like this scumbling in, to kind of tapping, almost like you're applying a makeup. and almost like you're blending out like a blush or something like that. And you'll see that with not a whole lot of paint on your brush, it'll start to blend up into the face. It's okay if you bring it a little bit high, because you can always bring your body color back in over it to adjust where it's transitioning there. But there. Now we have started a pink nose. Here we go. Okay, I also put a little bit of pink over the eyes, because we'll see that kind of pop out a little bit in detail. Little crumb there. Okay, I'm going to go back in with my body color. I think I'm going to put a little bit more of my unbleached titanium into my mix, because I still think I'm looking a little yellow. And I would like to get it a little bit more of kind of like the pale, kind of like a pinky color. And I'm actually just going to pull it straight out of my bottle, so I'm not spending time scraping it off. It's good.
How many coats do you usually recommend doing? Like for the body?
I'm sorry, I didn't catch it.
For the body color, how many do you recommend doing?
I'm sorry, how many what? You cut out?
Oh, sorry, layers.
Oh, layers. That kind of comes down to how it's going for you. You might find you arrive at a color that you really like, and you're like, you know what? I'm not going to do anymore. Probably at least 2 or 3 to at least start getting consistent. You can probably still see like a little bit of like the primer and base coat peeking through. So you kind of want to work past that. But it's okay if you need way more than that. Like there's nothing wrong with needing lots of colors to get to where lots of layers to get to where you need to go. Okay, yeah, I like that color better. There we go. That looks a little bit better. Maybe we're just looking a little yellow. Okay, so keep building up this body layer, okay, until you feel like that you can't see any inconsistencies from the base coats or the brush strokes on it. And like I just said to Alyssa, that's fine if that means 3 layers. It's okay if that means 14. It's just whatever it ends up being. You just don't really want to go a whole lot darker than this, because otherwise you're going to start kind of losing that gold champagne feeling. So definitely don't add like a lot of darker colors to this. Now, if you want like a little bit more shading to put down like the flanks and barrel area, you could add a tiny little bit of washed out copper in some areas, but I would be very, very careful with that, because that might get away from you pretty quickly. Keep brushing on in the direction of the hair, so this way if you do have some texture, it's still believable.
And if people aren't familiar with the direction of horsehair, are there references online that they can go look up?
Yeah, if you just look for horsehair direction chart, you'll find charts will kind of have like arrows over a drawing to show you kind of how the hair swirls around. And that's something that's really handy for any painting on any horse model, is generally being comfortable with the hair direction, how it starts from down the neck and then across the barrel, because then you get kind of these swirls across the flanks, and then it comes down the back leg. Especially if you're attempting to do patterns or spotted coats, that's an absolute must for pulling those off if you're trying to go for some realism there. Yeah, all you have to do is look for a hair chart, horsehair chart, something like that. But I know it's out there. And if you can't find it, again, you can come find me on Facebook. I'll help you find it. There we go. Okay, that's looking much better. I'm much happier with that coat color. I still could go a little bit paler, but that's okay. There's going to be variations in coat colors. If you got your pink on your nose a little too high, you can come back in with one of your smaller brushes. Oh, that one is trying to come apart. Do not come apart, please. Just going to clean it up a little bit. And I can come in with a little bit of the body color. And you can just always kind of blend it back in over the nose if it feels a little strong. And you can go back and forth over that layer a couple of times. The more you kind of go back and forth, the more it's going to soften it and kind of settle it in. So this way it won't look like quite such a stark transition between the pink and the rest of the body. And that's good for noses and like the softer, more velvety areas of skin on a horse, is just keep going back and forth. Like there's no limitation on how many layers you take to get to your end color. Okay, I need to let that dry because I've got a spot on my barrel that's trying to lift up a little bit. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in to put a little bit of my modeling on the nose. And what I'm going to do for that is I'm going to grab, I'm actually just going to do this with my paintbrush. Actually, no, I changed my mind. You can, to make your gray, a little bit of your titanium white and a little bit of black. Just a tiny little bit. It's a very soft gray, so you don't need to go super dark. Think gray, velvety nose gray. If you start a little dark, you can always come back in with a lighter shade to correct it if you don't like it. Okay. And I'm going to take one of my finer brushes. Now, sometimes for modeling, I will actually take one of my smaller brushes and I'll actually damage the tip a little bit so it kind of like frays a little bit. And then you can kind of take just a little bit, fairly dry layer. You don't want too much. And you can just kind of tap it around the muzzle to model it. And if it's too much paint, brush it off and just kind of come back and tap it in. And if you feel like it's too dark, that's okay.
Jen, can you move the model just a little higher up in the screen?
Sorry.
Yeah, there you go. Thank
there
you.
Go. Thanks for letting me know. And if you get the gray a little too dark, that's fine. You can always come back in with the pink and balance it back in. You're not locking yourself in on the very first application. And get the paint off my brush. It was a little heavy. There we go. Do the same around the eye. Just lightly. It doesn't have to be super big patches, just something to kind of help indicate that there's something going on with the skin there. Almost like you might see on Appaloosa coat colorings. You might see kind of that modeling around the eye. I'm going to get a little bit on the groin too. You don't need a lot of paint on your brush for that part. There we go. Yeah. Okay. And we'll come back in with our pink a little bit. Just to soften it. Oops. I got a little too light pink on that. Let's go back in with the darker. There we go. That's better. There you go. And a very thin layer of the pink, just so that the gray kind of casts a shadow through it. Sometimes that's enough for the modeling. It doesn't have to be super stark or super strong. It's just a little bit. Again, you can always go back and forth until it's something that you're happy with. If it looks a little too strong, then just dampen it back down with the pink. And just keeping going back and forth. How's yours looking, Alyssa?
It's coming out pretty good. I'm pretty excited about this. I mean, I'm no artist, but I mean, it's so much fun to paint, and I mean, you don't even have to you don't have to be an artist, or you don't have to know colors, and you can follow along with these videos, and I don't know, it's coming out pretty cool.
I'm glad to hear that. All right, so I've gotten some of my modeling on. I could do more on that, but for the sake of time, we're going to keep moving on this. Now, another thing for champagne horses is their eyes will tend to be more of a brown to a lighter brown color. They're usually not going to come across black like on other colors. So you could grab a little bit. If you want to do the eye, you don't have to right now, but that's sometimes kind of the fun part, is getting the eye on. Let's see, I'm actually going to take a little bit more of my burnt sienna and put it into my titanium white, and I'm actually just going to make a darker brown with that. I kind of like to start with a mid color on the eye, and then you can always add a darker or lighter to it to kind of give it a little bit of depth. Of course, with the Stablemate eyes, they're a little small, and I'm actually going to have to take off my glasses for this because that's just where I'm at in life right here. And we're just going to give it a gentle... Find that eyeball and start with a little bit of brown. Again, it's okay if it's not exactly brown. You could leave yours a little bit lighter if you kind of want a bolder eye color. You could darken it a little bit. There we go. Okay, I'm going to let that dry. Now, what did I do for the ears on this?
And can you just do a close-up?
Don't forget to bring your body color up.
Oh, Jen, can you just do a close-up of that eye you just painted? Pull it a little higher up in the camera, please.
Yeah, let's see about just as long as my focus behaves.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, the focus is a little off, but you can see a little better where you put the brown.
Yeah, just a little bit. And it can be kind of a light brown because you always go back and darken it a little bit. So when you look at an eye, it's going to have all different colors depending on where the light is hitting it. So you can just kind of start with the mid color, go from there. I'm just going to make sure I get a little bit of my body color up into the ears. The ears are a little bit easy to miss with the bigger brush. There we go. Okay. All right, I'm going to get another body color on this. I'm just going to check my clock. Okay, we're doing good.
We are doing good. We have about 8-ish minutes to go before we start to switch over to our next workshop. So if you're joining us live for Jen's, we have a fun one coming up next. So you can click on that one when we're done.
Okay. All right. So I'm just going to quick get my next body. And again, you do not have to go at my painting pace here. We're just kind of showing you the steps so you can follow along as you need to. So I'm just going to get a body color on that just to kind of get it a little bit more consistent looking there. All right. So with that time left, let's talk about more of our final details. Let's talk about the mane and tail mix here. So for the mane and tail, where's my notes? Okay, so what I like to do for the mane and tail is you could go straight pearl. It's just the pearl is very translucent, so it doesn't build up very well over the color. So I like to go with gold and the titanium white. And then you can kind of make it as strong or as light as you want, but the gold will help kind of give it that shimmer. And for your first layer on the mane, it can be a little bit darker, so you get it down into the lower areas, and then you can kind of bring a lighter color over the top of it once that's dry to kind of imply the depth on it. So let's see what this looks like. There we go, that's a good start. Okay, and you can use either the broad brushes or you can go in with the fine point brushes at this part. I like to start with the broad brush to get over the top areas. And then I might go in with a finer point brush after. So there's that. Don't forget the tail. It's easy to neglect the tail, especially if you're just holding it the entire time like I was.
I know that's always the hardest
base
part.
Color on there. Yeah, you're like, oh, that's the part I was holding. And again, that's really why I love the acrylics, is because it's really easy for me after a moment to switch fingers onto the body. I'm not patient enough to wait a whole lot longer than that. Okay. All right. And the same gray that you used on your muzzle is the same gray that you can use for hooves, if you'd like. If you give yourself white leg markings, you can instead do like a seashell hoof, which is like that yellowy color. You can do that with unbleached titanium. I actually like to put a little bit of the pink burnt sienna in it, because if you look at those hoof colors, there's actually a little bit of pink in them, and that kind of sets it off from the other yellows on the body. But a lot of the colors that are on our palette now are ones that you can use to finish it up. Okay. Oh, I got a big glop on his chest. Where did that come from?
No, it's nice with the wet palette here. You have all the paints you need.
Yes, you have all the paints you need. If you have one that seals, you can pop the lid on and walk away from it. You can come back to it the next day, and they should be good.
Oh, yeah.
So it's really, really great. Okay. So that's a good starting base coat for the mane tail. It's okay if it's really close to your base color on the body. That's totally fine. Let's get the finer tip brush in here so we can pull it down to some of the hair strands that are actually on the body. And don't forget your forelock. With the Tennessee Walker, he's got kind of like that shaved area at the bridle path. Pull across there. Hopefully I'm not casting too much of a shadow. I pulled as many lights out here as I could. It's a little bit darker than normal because we've got this storm moving in, so
It's a little rainy up here in New Jersey.
A little rainy. Just a little bit. Just a tiny bit rainy in New Jersey. Don't forget the other side of the mane. Make sure if you bring it down all the way to the neck and make sure it connects, that can be another little detail that really kind of helps sell that color change. There we go. Okay. All right, let's finish up this eye. All right. Now for the pupil is what will help kind of make it not seem just like a blob of color on there. And the pupil, you can go black. I usually prefer to go with a very dark brown for it just because it's not too stark, but this is kind of one of those things you can do what you want. But if you throw in a little bit of the burnt sienna in with the black, you'll get this really nice warm brown. Okay, I gotta take my glasses back off again. Sorry if I get a little close to the camera here because I gotta be able to see. Pupils are almost always horizontal to the ground. So with a horse carrying its head like this, the pupil shape is going to be kind of like that stretched out circle from side to side. Eyeballs float. They do some really wacky things. There we go. And all of a sudden, there's our horse. Glopped it a little bit. And if you glop it a little bit, that's okay. You can go back in with your previous color, correct it, and do it again. Hopefully better.
And the cool thing about the paint is if you mess up, you can just paint over it and get it, go back.
If you want a little bit of depth on your nose, come back in with one of your darker pinks and just stab a little bit down into the nostrils where it gets a little bit deeper. You can also kind of outline the mouth a little bit like that. And that just kind of helps it stand out a little bit. Looks like there's a little bit of a change of shade or depth there. Okay, I'm going to come back to the mane and tail now that that's dried just a little bit. Get my glasses back on. So I'm going to go back to that darker mane tail mix that I had. I'm actually now going to lighten it a little bit. A little bit more of the unbleached titanium. And if you feel like it's starting to lose its sparkle, you can always throw a little bit of the pearl in with it too. Pearl is great for adding sparkle. It does lighten your colors because it's kind of like a silver. So just be prepared for that. And let's go back in and put this lighter look. Now I'm not going to go back in all over the mane and tail with this color. I'm now going to kind of go over the higher points of the mane. So now we kind of look like we've got some lighter colors on the areas that are closer to you and standing out more.
The higher points, what do you mean by that of the mane?
So if you look at how the mane is sculpted, you'll see that there's there's areas that are closer to the body, and then there are areas that stand out. So to replicate shading, areas that are further away from you are darker, and areas that are closer to you will tend to catch more light and therefore look lighter. So if you want to add depth to your mane, do a darker color overall, and then take a lighter color, but do just the parts that are higher and closer to you. Does that make sense?
That does.
Okay.
We do have one question from Susan. Yep. Would a Perlino be lighter or darker than a champagne?
I believe, and this is without me going and double checking what I'm remembering off the top of my head here, so please double check me on this information. A Perlino, if I'm recalling the correct color, I believe is a little bit lighter, and I think they tend to look a little bit more pinky colored. They kind of give off a little bit more of like that pinky tone rather than more this gold one. But I would say probably Perlino lighter in the sense of that they look like they have less color in their mane. I'm sorry, in their body, but it's a whole different color altogether. So you'd have to compare them side by side, and you might see different things between two different individuals. Because one champagne is going to look different from the next, and one Perlino might look a little bit different from the other. But I want to say Perlino tends to look a little bit pinkier colored.
Awesome, thank you.
But, yeah, just do double check me on that. because dilutes are hard. Okay.
And I know we're getting close to time here, Jen. So I know you're almost finishing up. So let's finish up. And if you have any closing remarks for everyone, now would be a great time.
Now would be a great time. So if you've gotten to your body color and you're happy with it, great. If you feel like you're like, I want a little bit more of like kind of this paler highlights on it, if you go in with your mane and tail mix, you can take it a little bit onto the big brush. And you can just kind of apply it, again, kind of talking about the highlights, kind of apply it on top of the muscling a little bit. Just very, very lightly, kind of where light would catch the bit of the barrel, the edge of the hip, and the top of the back. I don't know if that's really showing up on camera here, but you can see how that kind of gives the sense of that there's a little bit more color variation going on in the coat instead of just that flat color. So you do not have to do this. This is completely optional. But if you want to experiment with getting a little bit of highlights and some different tones going on in the high spots on your coat, go and do that with your mane and tail mix, because that will be pretty much a perfect complement to it. So to finish up your job here, you can put white markings on the legs, your hooves, make sure your eyes have pupils, and you can always keep lightening the mane and tail if it's not quite what you want. You can always go in with the pearl if you want it really metallic and sparkly. You get to decide when it's done. And of course, don't forget to sign it. It's your art piece, so make sure that you at least put your initials on it. So if somebody in the future picks it up, we know who painted it.
And then when you're done with this, do you recommend sealing it or leaving it as is?
I would recommend sealing it. I would let, when you're completely done, let it sit at least 24 hours to finish drying completely, ideally in as dust-free an environment as possible, and then you can seal it, and that will help protect your paint job. Your sealer can also help give it a sheen. You could go glossy if you want to make it look like a glossy model. You could do a satin for a more mid-shine, or you could do matte if you really want to kind of calm down the coat color. But yes, I always recommend sealer to help protect your finish. And as always, if you have problems or questions, you can come find me at the studio of Jenn Constantine. I'd be happy to take your questions there if need be.
Awesome. Well, Jen, I mean, your finished product looks beautiful. Definitely, if you were watching along and didn't have time to paint tonight and are going to try it tomorrow, it's super fun, super easy. And Jen, thank you so much for walking us through on how to paint our own champagne stablemates. This was awesome.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for having me. And I would love to see pictures of what you painted following this. So send me those pictures. I'd love to see them.
Yes, definitely post your pictures. You can post them on any of our Fun Day social posts we made. You can post them directly to Jen's. We would love to see your creations.
All right. And stay tuned for some sparkly fun with my friend Shauna.
Yes, if you're staying on, we'll be getting Shauna up and ready to do the Sparkling Fairy Stablemates. So stay tuned for that. Thanks, Jen.
Thank you, Alyssa.